Okay, welcome everyone to today's Ask the Experts graduate scholarship session. We've just started our live event, so please stay tuned. We're going to wait just another minute or two just to make sure that everyone's able to join us today. So please stay tuned and we're going to begin very shortly. All right, we are just a little bit after 2 now, and it looks like the number of new people joining us is starting to slow down. So I'm going to get started here with some housekeeping items before we kind of move into our Q&A and our content for today. So first of all, welcome to today's Ask the Expert session. So my name is Sarah Howard. I'm a Graduate Student Experience Specialist at Graduate Studies and Postdoctoral Affairs, or GSPA. And I am not a scholarships expert, but I am very happy to be your host and moderator for today's event. And we have several experts with us today. So they will be answering lots of questions for you, and I will introduce them in a little while. So a few housekeeping items before we get started. First, I do want to remind everyone that this session is being recorded. We do that so that it can be made available for you to rewatch or watch later if you do have to log out early. As a reminder though, as an attendee today, you don't have your audio or video on, so you won't be captured in the recording. Next, because this is a Q&A, we do have that Q&A function open for you to use today. Our experts will be answering some pre-submitted questions, and we will also be answering some questions that you're able to submit live. The live Q&A will happen towards the end of the session, but you can begin to submit questions at any time. So if as one of our experts is talking, a question comes up, feel free to submit that right away. You don't need to hold on to your question. So to submit your question, you can use that Q&A feature. You should find that at the bottom of your screen. As indicated on the slide, please ensure that you would include the name of the scholarship that your question refers to when you're submitting your question. This makes sure that we're able to direct your question to the appropriate expert and make sure that we're providing you with the best information. And I will also copy the names of those scholarships into the chat so you can just copy and paste them later. Please also note that when you submit a question, it will be visible to all of the attendees. We do this so that you can vote for or like other questions. So this means that if someone else has submitted a question, you have the same question, you can just click the little thumbs up button. This lets me know that multiple people have that same question, so we can prioritize which questions we address first. So because questions are visible to all attendees, you do also have the option to submit your question anonymously if you wish. When you're entering in your question, just make sure you click on the button that says anonymous to ensure that your name isn't included with your question if that is your preference. And finally, keep in mind that if you do have a question that's really specific to your own situation, it might be better addressed with an email directly to one of our experts. So please keep that in mind as you're submitting your questions today. Last item I have about questions is that I know there are lots of people joining us today, so we may not be able to get to all of your questions live. Please know that our experts will prepare written responses to those questions that will be posted on the web following this session. So if you don't receive a response live, please do know that our experts will still be answering your question for you. The next item, you'll notice that the chat is turned off for you today, so you aren't able to chat with us using that, just to make sure all of the questions go through that Q&A feature. But I know that our experts will also be sending you some links sometimes through the chat, so you still might want to pay attention to that for some helpful links. And my last housekeeping item is that we will have a survey for you to fill out when you finish with us today. So when you log out of the session today, you'll be prompted with a link to the survey. It is really helpful for us to receive your feedback to know how we can improve future supports for grad students. So please, if you're able, just take a few minutes to fill that out at the end of the session. All right, so now that the housekeeping is out of the way, we will move on. So very quickly, for our agenda this afternoon, we're going to start with a talk from Jeff Casello, who is our Associate Vice President in GSPA. He is going to share some insider academic advice for you today. Then I will introduce our scholarship competition experts before we move into the live Q&A. As mentioned, they'll answer some of those pre-submitted questions first, and then we will get to the questions that I can see you are already submitting live for us. So that's great. So let's get started then. So I will turn things over to Jeff.
Well, thanks so much, Sarah, and thanks to everyone who's joining us today. I see we have more than 200 participants in the event today, so this is really exciting. I have to say how grateful I am to the awards team, our panelists for today. We truly do have experts in the preparation of these scholarship applications. It's been just a real honor to work with my colleagues from GSPA. And I'll tell you that they are not just leaders at the institution, they're leaders across the province and nationally in terms of setting the profile and the processes for these scholarships. So we're really very, very fortunate at the university to have such expertise behind the scenes in supporting our students and getting the highest caliber applicants and applications. So I've been asked to talk a little bit today about what constitutes a really good application package for students. Just as a way of background, I've been in my role for 4 years, and one of the things that my team and the graduate associate deans do is we read all of these applications. And I can tell you that there really are some important attributes, and this is what I'm going to try to convey to you today in about 10 minutes or 12 minutes. Really, what are the elements of what makes a really excellent proposal and a really excellent application package? And again, I'll just say clearly that it's very easy, I think, for us when we read these to know who have put in the time and the energy and have taken good advice, and those who are, I would say, that they haven't really tailored their application to best practices. So what I hope you'll get out of my few minutes with you today is some good guidance from someone who has, for the last 4 years, read probably more than 1,000 of these proposals for scholarship applications at all levels. So let me jump right into it first. The first thing that I will tell you is that writing a research proposal is a really delicate balance that you have to achieve. It is on the one hand, you want to demonstrate to your readers that you have the technical expertise, the subject matter expertise, the academic capacity to do the work that you're intending to do. And that requires that in your proposal, you show appropriate levels of detail. So you have to clearly articulate what your research questions are, what's the hypothesis that you intend to test, what are the objectives of your research, and those need to be very clearly laid out for the reader. Those should include subheadings so that it is clear for the reader exactly what you hope to accomplish. One question that we often get is, can I use images in my proposal? And the answer to that is absolutely yes. Just ask yourself this: you only have so much space to convey the essence of your proposal. And you have to ask yourself whether or not the image that you're including in your proposal could be better stated with text that would take up the same amount of space as the image in the proposal. So try to balance those two things. Get the approach right that maximizes the impact of what you're trying to convey. And if that can be done best with an image, that's great. If it can be done best with text, that's the pathway you should use. And just one other word on using images. Sometimes we have students who supply images that are at such a small scale that they're not really valuable. So if you are going to include an image, make sure it's legible, make sure it's discernible, make sure that it's conveying the information that you want. I said earlier that this is a balance, and so I've talked a little bit about providing evidence of your capacity to do the work The other part of the equation is really what is the impact of your work? And this you have to think about in two ways. The first way is in terms of your scholarship, what is the impact? So if you're going to do work that is going to transform the way that your academic discipline thinks about a problem, that's obviously really important and that should be conveyed. In the same vein, if you're doing something that is going to be an incremental improvement over something that's already happening in the academic approach to your work, that's also really important, and that should be made evident to the person reading your proposal. But where students often fall down is they don't take the next step and articulate why the academic work you're doing is ultimately going to be important for society or for humanity or the economy or the environment. So I often think about a research proposal, if you will, in the shape of a martini glass. I don't know if you can think about that, but a martini glass has a very broad opening at the top, and that's the biggest kind of problem that you're trying to solve. So I work in public transportation. I'm interested in sustainability, and so if I were starting a research problem, I would often put the problem that I'm trying to solve in the context of those things: transportation, sustainability. That's the biggest kinds of problems that I'm trying to solve. Then narrowly, I bring the reader down to the specific problem that I'm going to try and solve, and that's what's happening in the stem of that martini glass. So I'm doing this specific research with, again, a well-articulated hypothesis, a well-articulated theory, methods. If you're gathering data, how will you analyze that data? How will you use the data? Those kinds of questions. And then at the bottom of that martini glass, there's another big opening, another big part that the glass actually stands on. And if you think about what that is, that's the application of your work to the broader society, the broader humanity. So when you're writing your research proposal, start this way. Ask yourself, what's the big picture I'm trying to solve? How am I specifically going to address one small part of that big picture? And then be detailed and specific about the methods that you intend to use. And then, before you conclude, make sure you make the reader aware of how the advancements that you're going to make through your research are going to influence not only your academic community, but also society as a whole or humanity as a whole. That's the important thing. Imagine that you are on this national committee and you're deciding which research proposals you want to fund. I think the answer most often is going to be the ones that they have confidence that the student is going to do great work. But second of all, the ones that have the potential to be most impactful for Canada and for the globe. And so you have to be able to make those 2 points collectively as you're writing your research proposal. I hope that's helpful. Let me just give you some more detailed advice. I think students often err on one side or the other. Sometimes they try to be so concise and so succinct in their writing that they leave out substantive elements. So you shouldn't leave out, for example, the way in which you're going to gather data or the way you're going to gather information, how that data are going to be analyzed and so on. What you can leave out is really very fine details about which equations one might use, or what kind of constructs, or what are the actual questions that you might ask in an interview. Those are the kinds of things that are getting too detailed for the reviewer. And remember that you only, again, have a finite amount of space. So you really have to get the right balance between providing enough detail that the reader can follow, but not so much detail that the reader feels overwhelmed by trying to follow exactly what you're doing. Be concise, as I said. Avoid the use of acronyms. It gets really tiresome to read through lots of these proposals and to continue to read the same, continue to have to go back and remind yourself what the acronyms mean. If you can balance the approach to your writing so that it is digestible to the lay audience and to the reasonably well-informed audience, that's perfect. When you're writing, don't write in a conditional way. So don't, for example, say, I hope to, or I aim to, or I intend to. Say, I will, or I shall, or my research will result in. Be direct and be succinct there as well, but be confident in the fact that you're going to be able to accomplish the goals that you've set forward for yourself. When you say something like, my hope is that my research will accomplish, that's not as effective as saying that my research will accomplish. You can see the difference in the confidence and the strength of the statements that you're creating by using those two different techniques. Get some feedback, obviously, on your research proposal. Have your supervisor read it, have colleagues in your field read it, but maybe most importantly, have people outside of your discipline read it. Have your housemate read it, have your friends read it, because your friends are going to be the ones who probably are reading it with the same level of knowledge as some reviewers might be reading it. They might have an understanding of the area in which you're studying, but they won't have the same level of depth or expertise that someone who is truly an expert in your field. And if it's only comprehensible to the people who are in your field, then it's not a good proposal. It has to, again, have that balance of being accessible to a reasonably well-informed audience, demonstrating your technical competencies, but not so technical that it's only understandable by 2 or 3 people in the world. The last comment on the actual proposal itself, or maybe 2 more comments quickly, is check your spelling, your grammar, make sure that you have it proofread. If English isn't a first language for you, make sure that you are having that proofread by someone for whom English is a first language. These programs tend to be very competitive, and typos and grammar mistakes in your proposal are the kinds of things that can be excluding, even if the rest of the proposal is really, really useful, or is really, really well prepared. So I hope those comments on the proposal are helpful. Just one more comment on your lay abstract. That's something that many students overlook. Don't overlook that. It's either a chance to engage your reader with a very comfortable lay language, easy to understand, or it's a way to alienate your reader. If you end up being so technical in your lay abstract that it loses anyone, I think that becomes problematic. So I hope those comments are helpful about your research proposal. I do want to talk briefly about your referees. Obviously, a referee's letter is really important to the caliber of your application package. So when you're choosing referees, it makes the most sense to choose a referee who knows you well and will provide you a very good reference. And so it's quite appropriate for you to ask a potential referee to say, do you have the time to prepare this? And if you do, will you, are you comfortable in providing a strong letter of support for my candidacy? Those are perfectly fair questions for you to ask them. It's also appropriate and necessary that you ask those of your referees as early as you possibly can. Give them more time instead of less time to prepare your letter is an appropriate approach. Don't hesitate to remind your referees when deadlines are coming due, and obviously thank your referees when they have provided your reference letter for you. You also want to give your referees information that is useful. So if you have a paper that has been published in a top-tier journal, you might provide that information to your referees so that they are aware that that's something that you'd like them to highlight in your referee letter. If you've done something beyond the ordinary in a course with them, if you've done a final project that was exceptional, anything that you think would be worthy of the referee to talk about, it's helpful for you to remind them. And obviously the best way to do that is to provide them with that information in a formal way, either through your transcripts, your CVs, a list of publications. I know myself, when a student asks me to write a letter of reference, I ask them, can I see your transcript? Can I see your resume? But beyond that, I ask students to tell me 10 things about them that I might not know. So if you were a concert pianist, if you were a varsity athlete, if you were a volunteer in a community, those things won't appear on any of the academic elements that we as referees might write. But if you tell us that, it certainly allows us to talk more about things like your character and your personality. And it gives the impression to the reviewers that we know you very well. And that, again, strengthens our ability to provide you with a really strong reference. So that's some guidance, I hope, for you as you are moving towards asking referees for support for your candidacy. There is a section on most of these applications where you can include special circumstances. And the most important thing to include there, if you do elect to include something there, is only do so if there is a real reason why your academic productivity was delayed. If you have recently become a parent, that's obviously a reason why your productivity would have been impacted. If you were unwell, if a family member were unwell, if COVID-19, if any of these things have directly influenced your ability to be academically successful or to be productive. If you were dealing with anxiety and depression, if you had your own health issues, those things can be explained in those special circumstances. What shouldn't go in there? If you had a disagreement with a supervisor, that shouldn't be included there. If you had one term where your marks were 84 instead of 88, that doesn't belong in the special circumstances. Really what we're looking for in those special circumstances is something that will explain what would be otherwise a difficult to rationalize gap or period in your academics. So again, I hope that is helpful when you're trying to decide about what should go in those special circumstances. We at the university have a whole suite of resources that are available to you that I really want you to try and take advantage of. There are sample proposals that are on SharePoint that other students have written that are really good examples of what we think are excellent examples of proposals. Talk to your graduate officer in your department, talk to your supervisor, as I said, talk to your peers. Review the scholarship instructions. I think that's really important. You can disqualify yourself pretty quickly if you're not following the rules associated with what can be contained in a scholarship application. And our team, I think, spends a lot of time looking at these packages to make sure that you are in bounds in terms of what is allowed and what isn't allowed. This is maybe the most important message that I can give you. When a reviewer sits down with your package, they have a very finite window of time that they're going to spend on your package. I know that's a little bit disappointing because you spend lots and lots of time on your package, but we only have institutionally, we probably spend 10 or 15 minutes on each application, each person does. And at the national level, where these things become even more competitive, I'm not certain that the reviewers have the capacity to spend even that long. So when we pick up your proposal, we are very much interested in being engaged by what's written there. And so if you write in a way that makes me interested in the work that you're doing, and again, I'm not an expert in every field that I'm going to read, but if you write it in such a way that I believe of the importance of what you're doing, your capacity to be able to do it, and you write that all in a way that gets me excited about the potential outcomes from your work, this is the very best way to be successful. This is the way to capture the reader's attention and to have us spend more time and get to know you even a little bit better, and to also really look for the gems that are in your proposal. If your proposal is dense, if it's full of jargon, if it has no links to the real world, if it is simply unintelligible to anyone who's not a advanced PhD or postdoc in your discipline, it's not going to get the same attention. That's the unfortunate truth. It has to be available to the people who are reading that, okay? When we're talking about what happens institutionally, let me just tell you what happens to be perfectly transparent. Every application that is considered by the university gets read by at least 2 people at the institution. Most often that is your Associate Dean, Graduate Studies, who will sort amongst all of the applications that are coming from your faculty and will prioritize those applicants that they think are best. Then someone outside of your faculty is the second reader on your application package. And what we do as an institution is we look at those 2 scores so that we can balance the in faculty and out of faculty perception of the application. And those applications that have the highest scores will move forward. And of course, I've concentrated today on the research proposal, on the referees, on the special circumstances, but I also encourage you to think about how you're presenting yourself. So what's increasingly important, of course, are publications. If you're new in your graduate career and you don't have publications, you can certainly talk about research work that you might have done as an undergraduate student. If you prepared a capstone project, if you had a senior's honors essay, if you had an opportunity to work with a professor on an element of a research project, all of that is a really good message for you to include in your evidence of your research capacity. Publications, as I said, those are great, but we should be careful about the publications. I think sometimes students want to include everything on their application, and sometimes we feel like students who who are telling us that they published in Nature, which is one of the world's most difficult journals to get published in. That has a different level of demonstration of capacity than if you were to publish in a blog that you wrote online without any real editing. So it's very important that you differentiate the things that you've published between those that are truly peer-reviewed and those that aren't truly peer-reviewed, and give the reviewers a true representation of what your academic outputs have been. So that's a lot. I'm sorry that I had to go as quickly, but the ladies behind the scenes have given me a very short window. My bosses have told me that I had 15 minutes. I probably ran a couple minutes longer than that, so I apologize. And I do know, I can see that there are a very large number of questions that are piling up in the queue, so I should shut up and maybe take a couple of questions and then turn it over to the real experts.
Great. Thank you so much, Jeff. I think that's all really valuable information, and I think hopefully addresses some of the questions people came in with already. So I do have two questions that I think relate really well to what you've talked about, and I'll ask you to address. So the first one here, the student has said, as far as I understand, the Anserk CGSD and PGSD are awarded based on academics, leadership, and research potential. So what does a competitive application for research potential look like? So the student says, for example, if they have one published paper, should they not even bother applying, or is it more based on things like reference letters, and they don't need to worry about that number of papers or citations as much?
Yeah. So we're very careful to look at applications and applicants based on where they are in their academic program. So if you are just entering the PhD program, we won't have an expectation that you've got 15 publications in top tier journals. But what we will expect is that you've engaged in research and you can demonstrate your capacity to have engaged in research. And even if that hasn't especially resulted in publications, the fact that you worked with a professor on a research project and your contributions, you can clearly articulate the kinds of things that you've done as an independent researcher. That's very important. Also, your academics, if you have a 97 average, that gives us great confidence that you have the academic capacity to be successful and to do fabulous PhD work. And so I think, we look also at your academic record, and that is not just curricular, that also is a bit extracurricular. So if you've been involved in a volunteer capacity, if you've created the statistics club in your undergraduate, if you've done that in your master's degree where you were the lead coder or some demonstration of going above and beyond. And Sarah, if I can I just spend 90 seconds talking about leadership, because I didn't talk about that earlier, and I think it's really important because this is increasingly how we differentiate between candidates. And the kind of leadership that we're looking for is both academic and non-academic leadership. So if you have been in a leadership role, whether that's in your program, outside of your program, in your community, these are the kinds of things that we're really interested in learning about you, because the leadership in that capacity demonstrates an independence, it demonstrates a strength of character that really bodes well for independent research as a master's or a PhD candidate. So don't be shy about demonstrating the places where you've been impactful. And that can often take the form, increasingly we're seeing it taking the form of mentorship. So if you're a master's student and you've worked closely with some undergraduate students as a TA, if you've gone above and beyond, let us know about that. If you have started, as I said, a club, let us know about that. If you have been a leader in any capacity, it's really important that you share that with us as you're writing your proposal.
All right, thank you very much, Jeff. So one more question for you before we let you go and move on to some more questions for our scholarships experts. This student is asking, for those who have little research experience and maybe an ancient undergrad, but have good and recent professional background, can this be built into their application? And would these candidates be penalized for low research expertise?
Absolutely. No to the second question, absolutely to the first question. So penalties, absolutely not. And professional experience, absolutely. I think that the key thing about articulating professional experience in this setting is to make sure that you frame it in the context of how is it similar to research? So if you've been working for 10 years and you've been doing sort of the same rote productivity job, well, that's a little bit more difficult. But if there have been things that have come to your workplace that have challenged you, challenged the way that your workplace operates, challenging the outcomes from your workplace, and you've taken an initiative and you've defined a problem and you've worked on that problem and you've solved it to the betterment of your professional community, that really very much parallels the research process. So if you're able to use your professional experience and try to frame them in a way that is similar to conducting research, that's the best way to represent that on your application.
Great, thank you very much, Jeff. All right, so we will move on now to the pre-submitted questions and the live questions. But first, I'm just going to, I see that there is a question from someone asking again if this is being recorded and if the recording will be available afterwards. So for anyone who joined us late, just a reminder that yes, we are recording this session. The recording will be available later. So if you missed anything, please know that will be available to you. I also see we are getting lots of questions in. So a reminder that for those questions that we may not have time to get to live today, our experts will be providing written responses that will be available on our website following this live event as well. All right, so I'm going to introduce our scholarships experts now. So joining us today, we have 4 members of our scholarships team. First, we have Miranda Bellotta. She is the manager, graduate financial aid and awards programs, and has been a part of the University of Waterloo community here for the last 14 years. So in her role, Miranda spends her day assisting students who are experiencing financial need through various bursary programs. And she's also responsible for managing the Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council, or Anserk, scholarship competition. So she will be answering your questions about Anserk scholarship competitions today. We have Laura Frizzy, who is the coordinator, graduate financial aid and awards programs, and she also has over 14 years of experience in university roles related to graduate financial aid, admissions, and scholarships management. She manages the Canadian Institutes of Health Research, or CIHR, scholarship competitions, as well as the major provincial scholarship programs, including OGS, or the Ontario Graduate Scholarships, and the Queen Elizabeth II Graduate Scholarships in Science and Technology. So she will be answering questions related to those scholarship programs. Then we have Elena Machado, who is a manager, graduate financial aid and awards, and is a University of Waterloo graduate herself. She has over 15 years experience assisting students navigating through their financial needs, awards, and funding options. And she manages the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council, or SHRC, scholarship competition. So she will be able to address your questions related to those SHRC competitions. And last but definitely not least, we have Heidi Musser, who is the Associate Director of Graduate Financial Aid and Awards, and she has been a member of the awards team and GSPA since 2001. She spends her days working with this dynamic awards team, whose primary goal is to promote and administer graduate funding opportunities for current and prospective graduate students. So as I mentioned, I myself am not an expert, but you have all 4 of these wonderful experts with you today who will be answering your questions. So as we're moving into our live Q&A, I just have 2 quick reminders for you. First, please remember to include the name of the scholarship that you're referring to in your question. As you see, each of our experts has their own area of expertise in the program that they manage, so it will really help them know who should address which question. And as I mentioned, if we don't get to your question, a written response will be provided on the website afterwards. All right, so let's get started with some of your pre-submitted questions here. All right, so our first question is, what scholarships can I apply to if I am an international student? And I will ask Laura to provide a response to that for us.
Hi, everyone. So if you're an international student, you're eligible to apply for OGS as part of the international competition. And in order to be eligible to apply this fall, you must be a current graduate student at Waterloo as of September to be eligible. So otherwise, if you're not a current student, you can apply next year. You can also apply for the Vanier as an international doctoral student, but the deadline to be considered for Vanier at Waterloo has passed. It was in July, so if you miss this deadline, you can apply the following year, next year.
Great, thank you, Laura. All right, so the next question we have here is, how will we know which scholarship agency to apply for? And I'll ask Heidi to respond to this one.
Great, thanks, Sarah. So when you're developing your scholarship application and your proposal, you really need to check out the eligibility criteria of the scholarship and check in with your current supervisor, if you have a supervisor already, or a faculty member that you know well, and just talk about your research proposal with them. They should be able to assist you in the right direction. There's also a really valuable website that I believe my colleague is going to put in the chat. It's the science.gc.ca website, and it goes over the ensuring that your research proposal falls under the mandate of the correct agency.
Great, thank you, Heidi. All right, so our next question here is, what marks matter for scholarship eligibility? And I'll ask Elena to respond to that for us.
Thanks, Sarah. So for the competitions that do require 80% average in each of the last and previous, we would be starting at the spring 2020. That would be the first term we're looking at. And then we would go back from there to the first year. And the year previous to that would be your last year. We are very familiar with looking at transcripts both across Canada and internationally. We also have procedures internally and conversion charts. So we have methods to make sure that we are being consistent in the way that we are assessing and reviewing transcripts.
Thanks, Elena. All right, so I'll direct this question to Miranda because it's about Anserk. So the question is, can Anserk doctoral awards be held at universities outside of Canada?
Thanks, Sarah. Yes, so when you're applying for Anserk, you're actually submitting one application that will be considered for both the CGS and the PGS award, so the Canada Graduate Scholarship and the Postgraduate Scholarship. So if you are successful and receive the top award, which is the CGS award, you must stay in Canada. Those awards can only be held in Canada. If you'd like to go outside of the country, you would simply just decline the CGS award, and then you could take up the PGS award instead. And that's provided that you have received a previous degree from a Canadian institution.
Great, thank you, Miranda. All right, so the next question here says, I'm not doing research in my graduate program. Am I eligible for a scholarship? So Laura, can you respond to that for us?
Sure, thanks, Sarah. So you can apply for the Ontario Graduate Scholarship Competition either through the domestic or international competition, but you're not eligible for a QE2, so you won't be considered for it, but you'd still apply as part of the competition and be considered for an OGS. In order to apply for the CGSM, so the Canadian Graduate Scholarship Master's program, you must have a research component. So if you're a course-based student, you're not eligible for CGSM.
Great, thank you, Laura. All right, so the next question is around references, and I'll ask Elena to respond to this one for us. It says, do references need to be tailored to each application?
Thanks, Sarah. So that's a really good question, and the answer is yes, absolutely. With each scholarship, they have their own set of selection criteria. And so the entire application, including those reference letters, really should speak to that criteria. It's like applying for a job where you have a job description. You want to make sure that you're hitting those points that you're going to be graded on. The only exception is for the OGS and QE2 scholarship. For that competition at Waterloo, we do allow students to reuse reference assessments from other competitions. So in that case, it may not refer to OGS specifically or the OGS criteria, and that's okay.
Great, thanks, Elena. So the next question here is again from an international student. It says here, I'm an international student who got accepted into a PhD program in fall 2020, but I still don't have a study permit. Am I eligible to apply for OGS? And Laura, that's a program you manage. I'll ask you to respond.
Great, thanks. So if you're an international student, as I mentioned, you can apply for OGS as part of the international competition. As of today's session, the ministry has advised us that successful recipients must show proof of an in-progress study permit or have already received their study permit. So if you're selected for to be an OGS recipient, you'll be asked to show proof of your study permit or study permit application before an OGS would be released to you. So it's not required at the time of applying for an OGS, only if you're offered an award, which would be in December.
Great, thank you, Laura. All right, so our next question here, if my professor and I have not decided on a thesis project, how do I write my proposal? Heidi, I'll ask you to respond to this one.
So this is a question that we will often get asked, especially by students who are new to graduate studies. They really haven't come up with something yet, but a student needs to demonstrate an area of interest. And even though if you are successful, you're not necessarily bound to the project that you wrote about in your application. You can accept a scholarship as long as it's still within the agency's mandate in which it was awarded. So that's the most important. So really what you need to do is pick a topic, something that interests you, something that you think you might be pursuing, and write as much detail about it as you can. As Jeff indicated earlier, pick your topic, explain your hypothesis, go into your research methodologies, and the time frame in which you will be conducting the research. So your faculty member has experience with these kinds of applications, so they should be able to assist you greatly with this. Thanks, Sarah.
Great, thank you, Heidi. So I have one more, hopefully quick question for Heidi, and then we will move into some of the live questions here. I also do just want to let you know that our scholarship team are working at also answering some quick questions via text. So you can also look and you'll be able to see those answered questions as well. So please check that your answer may have been answered via text. All right, so the next question here for Heidi is, how many scholarships can we apply for? Oh, Heidi, I think you're just still muted there.
Sorry, Sarah, thanks so much. If you are eligible, normally students will apply for 2 scholarships, and that would include the Ontario Graduate Scholarship and one of the tri-agency scholarships. You can only apply for one of the tri-agencies unless you are also applying for the Vanier Canada Graduate Scholarship, and that's the doctoral one. In that case, you'd need to apply for a regular Vanier, like the Vanier plus a regular tri-agency doctoral scholarship, and you could apply for the OGS. That's the only situation that you could apply for 3. Otherwise, normally students apply for 2. If you're successful with both competitions, that's fantastic, but you can only accept 1, and normally students would accept the higher valued scholarship.
Great, thank you, Heidi. All right, so we're going to move on to some of our live open questions here. So the first one I'll direct to Miranda. It says, can my current advisor be one of my referees for CGSM?
Great, thanks, Sarah. So yeah, absolutely. Current supervisor is definitely somebody that you would want to use as a reference or a referee. They would be able to speak to all of the factors that Jeff had mentioned earlier, like the selection criteria. They know you best. In fact, with most of the competitions, you are actually not able to use a potential supervisor as your referee. So if someone is going to be your supervisor, you don't want to use them unless they have already supervised you in the past, because they wouldn't know enough about you to speak to all of your qualities in your reference letter. So definitely go ahead and use someone that is currently your supervisor.
Great, thank you, Miranda. Okay, the next question is about Anserk Doctoral, so I'll send this to Miranda again. So it's a three-part question here about those applications. So first, will papers in review be considered for the application? For papers, does the order of authorship matter? And then are graduate courses considered in those applications? So I'll send that to Miranda, thanks.
Great, thanks, Sarah. Yeah, so if you have an item that's currently under review, you can list it. Often, if your publication is submitted, you will get a submission number. You can list that on your application as well. If you're just currently working on it and you haven't submitted it anywhere, it's not being reviewed by anyone, then you should not be listing it. In regards to how you should list your publications and the order of authors, etc., all of that information can be found in the Form 201 instructions. There's a whole section that speaks to the contributions section of the application and how you're supposed to list them, what category, and then how you list the authors. So review that, and then if you have specific questions about one of your publications, absolutely send me a quick email and I'll be more than happy to answer you. In regards to our graduate courses considered for the application, I'm not sure if that means like, are your graduate grades being considered? They definitely are. I'm not sure if I'm misunderstanding that question, but yes, the reviewers at the department level and the institution level, they look at your whole academic record. So they will be looking at what courses you have taken and what your grades are. So hopefully that addresses the three parts.
Great, thank you, Miranda. All right, so the next question here is a student that says, I had very poor grades in undergrad. However, the past 3 years, I've been in grad school and had very competitive grades. Will my undergrad be a barrier for me applying to Anserk, CGSD and PGSD? I'll send that to Heidi.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. I don't think that this would be a barrier. It would not be. In terms of eligibility, you know, and competitiveness, the committee reviews the entire application package, including the entire set of transcripts. So it would actually show, I think, a strength to the applicant to show the improvement, the progression in their grades. You're welcome to include a special circumstances if you think that would be beneficial to explain your circumstances, but it would not be considered a barrier. And actually your references could even help address that. But no, I think it actually just shows a strength of the candidate to show that progression. Thanks, Sarah.
Great, thank you, Heidi. All right, the next question is also for Heidi. The student is asking, how does UW approach the Vanier scholarship application?
Okay, so the Vanier is actually, it's the most prestigious of the tri-agency doctoral competitions, and it's the only tri-agency scholarship that international students are eligible for. And it actually is the one that gets launched the earliest. So it gets launched usually in May or June. And then the deadlines are, you know, in September. I actually have a deadline tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock for students to apply. But there's sort of a two-step process where interested students will have to express their interest in applying for the Vanier through their department by sending them a copy of their transcripts and a copy of their CV and a brief research statement. And then the department will determine whether or not to support that applicant continuing with a formal application. So there is a level of endorsement that's initially required in order to proceed with the actual application. So that's why we don't really talk a lot about Vanier at this time of the year, because it's late. And if you're interested and you perhaps missed the deadline this year, it might be something that you'd consider applying for next year if you're still eligible.
Great, thank you, Heidi. All right, so this next question is about OGS, so I'll direct it to Laura. It says, if I want OGS as a master's student, can I also apply for it in my PhD? This student specifies that they're a fast track student, so they never finished their master's.
Okay, so for OGS, we have maximum support levels that you can receive the awards for across your academic career. So for master's students, you can receive an OGS or QE2 for a maximum of 2 academic years, and doctoral students can receive it for a maximum of 4 academic years. So if you're transferring from your master's to your PhD, you just need to make sure that you haven't gone over those individual 2-year and 4-year maximums. In addition, this is on our website as well. Students cannot exceed a lifetime maximum of 6 years of government funding. So that includes any of the tri-agency scholarships, as well as OGS and QE2. So essentially, if you received it once in your master's, you can apply for it again in your PhD.
Great, thank you, Laura. All right, so another question about OGS for Laura. Is OGS the only scholarship for international master's students?
Okay, so we did kind of cover this, but I'm happy just to reiterate it again for our international students. So again, if you're an international student, you can apply for the OGS as part of the international competition, and for the Vanier, which has already passed, but you can apply next year.
Great, thanks, Laura. All right, the next question is for Miranda. It says, I am currently a part-time grad student, but will be rolling up to full-time for the winter semester. Am I still eligible to apply for the Anserk scholarship?
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, so how you're registered right now, whether or not it's part-time or full-time, doesn't really impact your eligibility. What you need to look at is the website of the number of months that you're allowed to have been in your program prior to applying. So you would want to combine 2 part-time terms to equal a full-time. But yes, you would be eligible provided that you fall within that time frame. You can still apply, and you can opt to hold the award as a full-time student should you be successful. The earliest would be spring of the following year.
Great, thank you, Miranda. I have another question about Anserk Doctoral here for Miranda. Can a successful Anserk proposal at the master's level be reused for the doctoral application?
So that's a good question. I mean, in theory, if you're still working on the same research, yes, you would be able to use some of that information. You would want to go in and perhaps show how much more progress you have made since the last time you've submitted your application. And just to remember that the selection criteria does have different types of weighting. So you wouldn't be able to, expect the same results just using the exact same proposal. So you would want to, show what progress you've made since your last application. But absolutely, if you're still doing the same research, you could go ahead and have the same outline that you used previously.
Great, thank you, Miranda. All right, the next question I'm going to direct to Elena. It says, what's the suggested timeline for preparing a tri-agency scholarship application? So contacting referees, starting the proposal, etc., if you're a Canadian citizen.
Thanks, Sarah. So the short answer is start now for the application. So these applications do require several components, one of which is contacting referees. So you want to start the application, start looking into who you're going to request as a referee. Also, you're going to need to figure out what you need to do in terms of transcripts. You'll want to draft your research proposal and have it peer reviewed. So like I said, many steps in it. So the best answer is start now. If you want to look at an exact timeline of when things are due and specific deadlines, each competition does have a timeline posted on the webpage, so you could refer to that. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Elena. So next question is an OGS one for Laura. Can an international student apply to the President's Graduate Scholarship independently from applying to OGS?
So the PGS, the President's Graduate Scholarship, is only provided to students who receive major federal and provincial awards at Waterloo. So you can't apply for it separately. It's sort of given as a top-up if you are successful in those competitions.
Great, thanks, Laura. All right, so the next question here is about Anserk, so I'll direct it to Miranda. If I leave my degree incomplete while holding Anserk with UWaterloo, and later I decide to start the same degree at another university, would I be eligible to apply for Anserk for the same degree again? Is there any limitation on the number of years?
Thank you for that question. So there's a few things with that one. If you want to leave Waterloo and take your Anserk doctoral to another institution, there is the possibility to do that. What you would need to do is at the time review the award holder's guide that strictly tells you what your options are and if you can transfer it to another Canadian institution. In regards to, I believe the question said, it also matters how much time is in between starting the new program. But I believe the question says, would you be eligible to apply again to Anserk? And the answer would be no, because unfortunately, if you've already held a tri-agency doctoral award, whether or not you have held the complete award, you are not allowed to apply again. I'm going to put the link for the award holders guide in the chat so that people can review that. So should you be successful, it has all of the conditions for holding the award, and if you need to make any changes to your research proposals, supervisors, university, all that information can be found at that link.
Great, thank you, Miranda. All right, so I see we are at about 4 minutes to 3 o'clock, so we'll probably have time for 1 or 2 more questions depending on how quick they are before we need to get wrapping up. And I do know we still have lots of questions in the queue, so please know that all these questions will go to our scholarship experts who will provide written responses that will be provided on the website. All right, so our next question here is for Elena. It says, what's the suggested timeline for preparing a tri-agency scholarship? Oh, sorry, we did that one. Next one then is for Loris, for OGS. Would I be considered automatically for another scholarship in case I'm not selected for OGS, or would I have to apply to that specific scholarship too?
So this is a quick one, so hopefully we can maybe squeeze in another one. So the answer is that you're not automatically considered for other awards. We used to do that. We don't do that anymore. So if you're interested in applying for any other scholarships, you need to apply to those specifically.
Perfect. Thank you for that quick response. So we will have one more question here then for Miranda, and then I'll turn it over to Heidi for some kind of final thoughts before we wrap up. So for Miranda, in case of rejection, do we receive a detailed feedback for the reasons behind that rejection?
Thanks, Sarah. So we do not automatically send out the reasoning for rejections. However, of course, we understand why you would want feedback so that you can improve your chances for being successful in a future competition. And we always recommend that you reach out to your graduate officer. They are typically the chair of the departmental ranking meetings, and they would have the most insight as to how your application ranked against others and any feedback that they could provide in regards to your proposal or how it was set up in general. We also recommend that you reach out to your supervisor, have them review it, offer any type of feedback. But in most cases, it is your grad officer, and if they have any if they would like to get more input, they will reach out to your associate dean, and they will offer you a connection there that you can reach out to them as well.
Great, thank you, Miranda. So I'll ask Heidi now to just wrap us up with some final thoughts before we close out for this afternoon.
Thanks, Sarah. I just want to thank my team. It looks like we got a lot of questions and we did a great job answering, and thank you to the students. It looks like you've read the information, read our websites. I just encourage you to really make sure that you are eligible for the scholarship before you fill out an application. It is a time-consuming process to fill out one of these applications, and make sure that you select really good referees and give them enough time to complete the reference assessments, because they're very busy as well and writing these letters of assessment for numerous applicants. So just make sure that you give them enough time to do these, and that you give them the selection criteria under which they need to write these letters. Just also want to make sure that you check out the resources. Miranda, I'm not sure if you could add the scholarship competition resources in the chat. That would be great. Thank you. There's just some links there to a list of the graduate officers if you want to get feedback from your department graduate officer or associate chair, as well as a link to the Writing Communication Center if you want to send them a draft of your application for them to review. But please know that we are here to support you, as well as your department graduate coordinators. They are a really valuable resource as well. Most of them have gone through these competitions numerous times and should be able to address any questions that you have also. Thanks, Sarah.
Great, thank you, Heidi. So thank you everyone for joining us today, and thank you again for submitting all of your questions. Lots of really great questions. I hope you got some answers. As a reminder, our experts will be taking a look at those questions we weren't able to get to live, and questions will be posted on our website along with the recording, so please stay tuned. Might take them a few days to put this together, so stay tuned, but know that they will be coming. Right. And just as a final reminder, please take a moment to fill out our short survey when you leave today. You will be prompted with a link to that survey when you close out of our Zoom webinar. It is really valuable for our scholarships team as they continue to support you as graduate students. So please, if you can take just a minute or two, it is a very short survey, just fill that out. So thank you again for joining us, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Bye, everyone.